Buongiorno a tutti e grazie.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and thanks for this welcome. Extremely moving for me. Allow me to thank most of all the president of the Meeting Foundation, Bernard Scholz, and also I want to express my special thanks to him and to the large Meeting family, not only for the invitation, but also because every year they organize an event that for almost half a century has marked a fundamental moment in the political and cultural debate of the nation. I also want to greet all the ministers, the members of parliament, my friend Maurizio Lupi, as well as the civil, military, and religious authorities present, and as well as the president of the Fraternity of Communion and Liberation, Davide Prosperi, to whom I extend my warmest regards. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here with you today, because I am convinced that what happens every year in these halls is something extremely valuable. I know very well what it means to organize events of this kind, and I am a witness to how much work, sacrifice, planning, and dedication this requires. And I must confess that I always look at the meeting with admiration, because it is a place of dialogue par excellence, as its very name says. And it has always been like that, even in years when ideological polarization was more pronounced and it was more difficult to overcome barriers in order to get to the heart of real problems of individuals, families, and businesses. And every time I see in the eyes, faces, and arms of the many volunteers who bring this event to life and who choose to dedicate part of their summer and more to setting up this event, a passion that only those who know the meaning of belonging to a community can recognize.
Senza i volontari.
Without the volunteers, the meeting would not exist. And for this reason, I want to applaud them all, because they are the very soul of this place and the fire that fuels each edition. They are a real spectacle.
Nei luoghi deserti costruiremo.
In vacant places, we will build with new bricks. For this edition, you have chosen the splendid phrase by T.S. Eliot, an author very dear to me, a Christian, a conservative, who became a reference point in the history of literature, winning the Nobel Prize in 1948. In the choruses from The Rock, Eliot recounts the exploits of a group of laborers assigned the task of building a new church in a hostile land, one of the many urban suburbs where the church is raised with a stroke of the pen. The workers encounter all kinds of unexpected events and difficulties, but they do not give up, and in the end they succeed in their endeavor, building a church in that vacant place, a place where men are reduced to empty bottles, to hives without honey, who may live peacefully but without feeling satiety or despair, a world conquered by nothingness, where there is no room for spiritual attention, for vertical aspiration, inhabited by anesthetized individuals who care about nothing more than finding a place to have a picnic or getting lost in powerful cars and secondary roads. And here I could find similarities with Atreyu, the boy from the never-ending story who fights against the advancing nothingness and who, as we know, played an important role in the imagery of my cultural education. But the point is that we are faced with a powerful metaphor for our age, an era in which we would like to standardize everything, transform each and every one of us into a perfect consumer, a returnable empty that can be filled with whatever we want, individuals without identity, without memory, without national, family, or religious affiliation. An individual whose desires are constantly changing and who therefore no longer loves anything. Individuals, in essence, whose existence no longer has anything worth committing to, building, or fighting for. Eliot's workers make a different choice. And so I understood the exhortation that you make to everyone with the title of this edition of the meeting. We are called in the physical and existential vacant places of our time to follow the same path as those workers. And for those who, like me, have government responsibilities, that encouragement and exhortation involves many things. Building with new bricks means understanding the time in which we live, knowing how to apply our own system of values to that time. It means building with bricks that can withstand the winds of that era, its storms. It means knowing how to act with new methods, knowing how to jump over the many swamps that lie along the way, especially in Italy, where the best intentions are often held back by blocked mechanisms, cumbersome processes, vested interests, and ideological preconceptions. The field in which we have shown that we want to be in these almost 3 years at the helm of the nation is not the field of ideology, utopias, and those who think it is possible to shape reality on the basis of their own convictions. The field we have chosen is the field of reality, because as Jean Guiton taught us, 1,000 billion ideas are not worth a single person. We must love people. It is for them that we must live and die. This is the field in which we intend to play, bringing to our decisions the humanity and practicality that only those who do not lose touch with the real world can demonstrate. In these almost 3 years, we have brought new bricks to Italy's international stance. As you know, how much energy I have personally devoted to what I consider a real mission. And the mission is to ensure that Italy regains its rightful place in the world, strong, proud, forthright, and loyal, in a word, authoritative. And today I am proud that Italy is seen in this way throughout the world, that he is no longer considered the sick man of Europe, but rather a model of stability and seriousness of government, that international investors consider us a safe nation, so much so that the interest rates we pay on our debt are now in line with those of a nation such as France, that EU institutions certify that Italy is first in Europe in terms of implementation of the National Resilience and Recovery Plan, or that the international press, rarely benevolent towards us, is increasingly inclined to consider us as a positive anomaly. And look, I could mention the many prophets of doom who pointed to foreign policy as the main Achilles heel of a possible Meloni government, but I'm not interested in that. What interests me, rather, is that many of them have had to come to terms with a very different reality, and I can only hope that in their hearts they are all happy to have been wrong. However, to tell the truth, it is not thanks to me or the government that Italy is considered a key player. We have done nothing more than be aware of what we represent, of the great nation we have the honor of leading. This awareness is the only real difference with the past. And we bring this awareness to all the tables, starting with those relating to the very serious international crisis we are experiencing. Finally, after 3.5 years in which Russia showed no sign of dialogue and demanded Kiev's capitulation, there are now glimmers of hope for negotiations. These glimmers of hope have been made possible thanks to an initiative by the President of the United States, but even more so thanks to the heroic resistance of the Ukrainian people and the united support of the West, Europe and Italy. Despite public opinion not always being convinced on the issue. Now, we must strongly believe in this opportunity for dialogue towards a just peace, however complicated it may be, and contribute our ideas and proposals. Italy has always maintained that the key to any peace process is the establishment of robust and credible security guarantees for Ukraine, capable of preventing new wars and aggressions. This is the starting point, the unspoken prerequisite established in Washington at a recent meeting between Americans, Europeans, and Ukrainians. And speaking of new BRICS, the Italian proposal, based on a mechanism inspired by Article 5 of NATO, is currently the main one on the table. A possible contribution to peace provided by our nation, of which we should all be proud. And peace with justice and security is what we are pursuing with our European and Western partners, including in Gaza. I know that you opened this edition of the meeting with a moving encounter between an Israeli woman, the mother of a kidnapped person, and a Palestinian woman. Well, we did not hesitate for a single minute to support Israel's right to security and self-defense after the massacre of October the 7th, an horror that will remain on the conscience of the terrorists who for too long have been using civilians in Gaza as a shield. But in the same way, we cannot remain silent now in the face of a reaction that has gone beyond the principle of proportionality, claiming too many innocent victims in an attempt to even involving Christian communities, which have always been a factor of balance in the region. And now this is definitively jeopardizing the historical prospect of the two peoples, two states solution. Well, I want to seize this opportunity to say that we condemn the unjustifiable killing of journalists in Gaza and accept an unacceptable attack on press freedom and on all those who courageously risk their lives to report on the tragedy of war. As a nation friendly to Israel and the Jewish people, we call on all nations and political forces to exert every possible pressure on Hamas to release the Israeli hostages still being held. And we call on Israel to cease its attacks, to end its military occupation of Gaza, to halt the expansion of settlements in the West Bank, allow full access to humanitarian aid in the Gaza Strip, and accept proposals from Arab countries to define a framework of stability and security. And we proudly claim, however, the role played by Italy in this crisis, because we are the European nation that has done the most on the humanitarian front. And for this, I thank especially the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Antonio Tajani, in particular. We are the leading non-Muslim country in the world for medical evacuations from Gaza, because there are those who write motions and shout slogans, and there are those who save children, and we are proud to be among the latter. I am proud to be among the latter. We claim Italy's pragmatic and proactive role on the international stage and within the European Union. A European Union that seems increasingly condemned to geopolitical irrelevance, unable to respond effectively to the competitive challenges posed by China and the United States, as Mario Draghi rightly pointed out a few days ago from this stage. Now, having gone from being unpresentable for having placed my party in opposition to the Draghi government to being described as an Iron Dragian, well, an Iran drug supporter, I will enjoy reading the newspapers tomorrow to see which of the two boxes I will be placed in this time. I don't care. What I do care about are the issues raised. I would like to point out that I agree with many of the criticism I've heard about the current state of the European Union, so much so that I have often voiced them over the years, and have been harshly criticized for doing so, even by many of those who are now applauding. I knew that sooner or later everyone would have to face reality, because this phase of enormous change in which the paradigm on which we saw the EU built has been overturned, and decisive democracies and cynical autocracies challenge us every day, paradoxically offers us an extraordinary opportunity, an opportunity that we can only seize if the European Union is able to rediscover its soul and its roots, yes, including its cultural and religious roots, which were culpably denied years ago. Because, very simply, if you don't know who you are, you can't even define your role in the world, your mission in history. Bureaucracy will not get us out of the storm. Politics can do that. Regulations will not make us stronger. Ideas can do that. Blind ideologies will not liberate our societies. Reference values applied to the reality we live in can do that. But we must know that returning to being protagonists of history and of our own destiny is not easy, is not painless, and is not free. We must, for example, be willing to pay the price of our freedom and independence. After decades of outsourcing European security to the United States at the cost of inevitable political dependence, the political world I come from has always raised the issue, taking on the responsibility and political cost in terms of consensus, of arguing that only those who are able to defend themselves are truly free in the choices they make. We talked about the need for a European pillar of NATO with equal strength and dignity to the American one, when these issues were not fashionable. And let me say, and that makes me smile, that those who today claim the need to emancipate themselves from the US are the same people who have always opposed a policy of independence in terms of defense and security, because the two things simply do not go together, ladies and gentlemen. Building with new bricks in Europe means starting afresh with politics. I agree on this. That means vision, passion, conflict, and synthesis, participation and democracy. It means reducing overwhelming bureaucracy and supporting the competitiveness of business to combat the decline in manufacturing. It means putting people and not ideology back at the center of nature and investing in our own supply chains to reduce strategic dependencies that we have. That means addressing the demographic problem, because otherwise, in a few decades, ladies and gentlemen, there will be no European civilization left to defend. That means, as I said, building our own security model integrated into the Western system of values and defense. In short, it means outlining a Europe of pragmatism and realism, going beyond the somewhat stale debate between more Europe and less Europe, because the real challenge is a Europe that does less but does it better, that does not stifle and suffocate nation-states but respects their role and specificities, that does not erase identities but enhances them into a virtuous and greater synthesis. United in diversity is the motto of the European Union, and we should all truly be inspired by that motto, because the new bricks are also a new way of experiencing ancient cultural, spiritual, and religious identities. I do not trust those who are ashamed of their identity, but at the same time, I do not trust those who are unwilling to experience it in a new way. Eliot said that tradition must always be reinvented. Being conservative does not mean building with old bricks, but always looking for new bricks to continue building a house that you did not start. It means loving the lifeblood of a history that others have started and wanting that history to bear ever more abundant fruit thanks to your contribution. And our house, to which we must add new bricks, is the West. Not, as I said several times, a physical place, but a system of values born from the encounter between Greek philosophy, Roman law, and Christian humanism, a synthesis that has fertilized the ground where the separation between state and church has grown, where men are born equal and free, where life is sacred and holy and care for the most fragile is an absolute value. This is who we are. And this is what has allowed our civilization to progress over the centuries and be a model to follow. Ladies and gentlemen, the West still has much to say and give, but we need awareness and humility. We need to know how to question ourselves. We need respect for ourselves, which is an essential condition for respecting others. And Italy is doing its part to show the way. We have brought new bricks to Africa, creating a model of cooperation that does not want to have a paternalistic and predatory approach, not at all, building instead partnerships based on mutual respect, trust, and sharing. In other words, on the ability to look each other in the eye as peers, as equals, finding together the areas where we can make a difference and have mutual benefits. Because unlike other players, we have no ulterior motives. We are not interested in exploiting the African continent for its rich raw materials, using them to increase our own well-being. We want instead Africa to prosper alongside us by processing its resources, cultivating, growing its fields, providing jobs and prospects for its best and brightest, and being able to count on stable governments and dynamic societies. This is a new approach that we are implementing through the Mattei Plan for Africa, the strategy that Italy is pursuing together with several African nations to promote quality investments and major projects in the fields of infrastructure, energy production, and above all, so the enhancement and development of human capital. Training and education are two constant elements in the projects we have launched, from the large agricultural training center and innovation center that will be built in Algeria to the commitment we are pursuing with the AFSI Foundation in the Ivory Coast to reach over 800 primary schools and around 200,000 children and young people living in the most difficult areas. But what we want to build is not just a package of projects. It is a new pact, a new alliance between free nations that choose to cooperate because they believe in the values of the centrality of the person, the dignity of work, and freedom. And this is becoming a model for many other countries too. And I am proud that this model involves the best energies of our country in a team effort that enhances the entire Italian system, the private sector, the civil society, and the third sector. This is the proof that when Italy acts with vision and pragmatism and united, it can make a difference. We have laid new bricks on the migration front, fighting against irregular arrivals and expanding regular arrivals in a framework of seriousness and rigor as never before. We have done so because regulated and legal immigration can be an asset to any nation, but illegal and uncontrolled immigration is damaging any society. The point here as well, the point is that We are not interested in exploiting migration to obtain cheap labor for our production systems. Instead, we are interested in fighting against the root causes that drive too many young people to pay ruthless traffickers to undertake potentially lethal journeys in search of a better life that our societies are almost never able to guarantee.
We are interested in codifying and defending the right not to have to emigrate, because it is true what a great man of the church, such as Cardinal Robert Sarah, reminds us. Those who consider migration necessary and indispensable are in fact acting selfishly. If young people leave their land and their people, Sarah asks, in pursuit of the promise of a better life, what will become of the history, culture, and existence of the country they have abandoned? That is why Italy, with this government, has played a decisive role in changing the European approach to this challenge, in my view, because if today we are prioritizing the implementation of equal partnerships with countries of origin and transit and the defense of the European Union's external borders and the strengthening of repatriation policy and the development of innovative solutions, it is thanks to our courage and our determination. These choices have led to a twofold result, as you know, a drastic reduction in irregular entries and, above all, a reduction in the number of deaths and missing persons at sea. It is this result that should make us most proud, because there is nothing more important than saving a life or rescuing it from the clutches of human traffickers. And I want to make it clear at the beginning of this season that any attempt to prevent us from dealing with this phenomenon seriously and with determination will be rejected. No judge, no politician, no bureaucrat can prevent us from enforcing Italian law, ensuring the safety of our citizens, combating the slave traders of the third millennium, and saving lives. Because what we want to demonstrate is that politics can regain its authority. But to do so, it must be able to face up difficult challenges. That is what we have done, for example, in those areas of our country that had been culpably abandoned by the state and left to decay and the mafia. We are rebuilding with new bricks, restoring hope and bringing back the joy of normal things, like a park for children to play in, a nursery school where children can grow up, a center where they can play sports, or a university where they can develop their talents. We started, as you know, in Caivano, and in that area we demonstrated that the state can keep its word, can honor its commitments, can finally show its credible face. Because if you think about it, this is what really citizens expect from politics: the courage to tackle the most complex problems, even at the cost of failure, and the stubborn determination to serve the common good, always putting people at the center, especially the needs of the most vulnerable. Because there is no other way, as Pope Leo recently reminded us, to make politics the highest form of charity. But what we have done in Caivano is just the starting point of a much longer journey, which aims to reach all those places where the state has preferred to back down rather than take risks. We're now focusing our work on 8 areas where we are extending the model that in Caivano has made it possible to offer teenagers real and concrete alternatives to drug dealing, crime, violence, and marginalization. Of course, the challenge ahead of us is enormous, and none of us is so arrogant as to claim that all the problems have been solved. But it is a fact that this government has chosen on this front not to look the other way, as others have done. We want to rebuild with the new bricks of truth. with the courage to say obvious things that unreasonable ideologies have tried to deny for too long, such as that drugs are disgusting, they destroy lives, they promise you something that they cannot give you, and in doing so they slowly enslave you. But also that, on the other hand, that if you fall into addiction, you're not lost. If you ask for help, you will find someone willing to take you by the hand, to share your struggle, your resistance, and your darkness, to build a future of freedom together. One of these realities is close to here, San Patrignano. I'll go to visit them shortly, but there are so many more like that. Clear and, well, courageous messages in the time we are, but accompanied by facts such as record investment in drug addiction prevention, 165 million euro, about double what was available in previous years, and concrete support for an entire world made up of community services operators, volunteers that for too long has operated amid the indifference of the institutions and wanted nothing more than to have the state on its side. I want to confirm to those communities that the state is now on their side. And no matter how hard it is a wonderful effort, full of love, hope, and future. And because resignation has never been an option for us, nor is it an option in the face of what many now see as an inevitable demographic freeze in the Western societies. Here too, as I have said many times, decline is not the only possible scenario. Decline is always a choice. Fighting that decline is our choice. And we will make every effort necessary to rebuild a family-friendly and birth-friendly society in which parenthood is a socially recognized, protected, and supported value. In which the family is once again recognized and valued for the irreplaceable role it plays. And I say this also in announcing that one of the priorities on which we intend to work together with the Minister of Infrastructure, Matteo Salvini, whom I thank, is a major plan for affordable housing for young couples. Because without a house, it is far more difficult to build a family. Despite the limited resources available, as you know, this government has not shied away from making courageous choices, guaranteeing the net benefits for families of over 16 billion euro in 2024 alone, increasing the amounts of paid parental leave to 80% and making nursery school free for the second child, just to name a few measures that make work-life balance a reality and not just a slogan. But we also have to say that all this risks being in vain without a new and different cultural climate which we must build together. For decades, bad teachers have proclaimed that parenthood was an archaic and patriarchal concept that had to be fought and replaced with more modern values, except that there is nothing modern about renting the womb of a poor woman, depriving a child of a mother or a father by law, sending the message that parenthood is the enemy of personal fulfillment, or even that children should not be brought into the world because they pollute. Only ignorance can support these delusional arguments, and ignorance cannot build any modernity. Clearly, work is a cornerstone of all this framework, and in particular women's work. And I am proud to know that under my government, the first led by a woman, we have achieved record female employment, even though I'm not yet satisfied. Certainly, data on employment trends in Italy show that with the right choices, it is possible even here to build with new bricks, finally giving full effect to the first article of our Constitution. As you know, in a few days, on September the 7th, the Church will proclaim a 24-year-old man a saint. That young man came from one of the richest and most important families in his city, and he could have enjoyed his privileged status, but he didn't. Instead, he chose to serve his neighbors and those most in need. That young man's name was Pier Giorgio Frassati, and in the working class and industrial Turin of the early decades of the 20th century, he devoted his energies to the least and the poorest. He also gave them money, but above all, he worked hard to find them jobs. And when he was presented with the case of a father who had lost his job and could no longer perform heavy work, he chose to anonymously give him 500 lira to enable him to start a small business, an ice cream parlor. And when he was asked if he hoped to see his money again, he replied, "It is good to give money and bread, and it is even better to give work, because it is in work that man finds his full dignity. It is in the accomplishment of work that man understands he is free." An unemployed man, said Don Giussani, suffers a serious attack on his self-awareness, because a man knows himself only in action, during action, while he is in action. For too long, before us, those who governed Italy lost sight of these teachings. They confused the right to work with the right to an income, taking refuge in welfare in order to avoid exercising the difficult duty that falls to the state, namely that of creating the conditions for the right to work to be effectively guaranteed. On the contrary, we have always believed that while subsidies such as universal basic income make society less responsible and stunt people's growth, subsidiarity, that is, society wherever possible, the state when necessary, mobilizes people. We have always believed that the true wealth of a nation and its people lies in work. This is the vision we have followed and applied in all our choices. But ultimately, perhaps we've just believed in Italy, in its businesses, in its workers, and put those businesses and workers in the best position to unleash their potential. The positive employment figures that we are seeing encourage us clearly to continue in this direction, to consolidate the growth trajectory that has allowed us to create over 1 million new jobs in just over 1,000 days, most of which are permanent jobs. However, we have set ourselves an equally ambitious goal, namely to rebuild the dynamic between workers and employers on new foundations. In a productive fabric such as ours, made up largely of small and medium-sized enterprises, this dynamic can only be based on sharing and not on confrontation, because I have never met an entrepreneur who did not consider their employees to be the main resource available to them. And the first fundamental new brick that we have cemented together with the social partners and intermediate bodies was the Popular Initiative Law, a historic battle of the right, then promoted by the CISL, approved by Parliament and supported by the government on the worker participation in business management. This was a milestone that Italy had been waiting to reach for almost 80 years. and it represents the starting point clearly for developing a genuinely subsidiary vision of work and production. We have put work back at the center, but we have also worked to restore Italy's credibility, which it needed in order to tackle one of the most complex economic, financial, and international situations ever. This credibility has been recognized by the markets, investors, and savers, and we have been able to build it, yes, by paying close attention to public finances, but without sacrificing record levels of resources to healthcare and business support or the purchasing power of low-income workers and vulnerable families. We did this by making the tax wedge cut structural, by exempting productivity, bonuses and fringe benefits from taxation, by introducing bonus personal income tax for companies that invest and hire, and by reducing social security contributions and support deducting labor costs from 4 to 3 levels. And now it is time to do more. Now we want to focus our attention on the middle class so as to make the system fairer and more incentivizing for those who generate income and contribute to the development of the nation. And similarly, we intend to continue supporting businesses where the most ambitious goal remains the structural reduction of energy costs, which weigh heavily on our competitiveness as a country. And yet, the centrality of work and the individual would remain a theoretical appeal if it did not also imply serious commitment to education and training, which is not a new brick, but the very cornerstone on which it is possible to build an Italy that is a protagonist of a new era. We are working to multiply opportunities and promote merit, the only real social ladder that we have at our disposal, if accompanied by equality at the starting point, obviously. And it is a path that we have embarked upon, not only by ensuring greater resources, tools, and staff for schools, universities, and research, not only with the reform of technical and vocational education, because for us the challenge is not school-work alternation, rather a great school-work alliance, but also with the courage to introduce small but significant revolutions, such as the one concerning the methods of access to medical schools. And if we want to have the courage to bring other new bricks to the world of education, we must not be afraid to complete the journey we have begun in recent years and find the tools that will ensure that families, especially those with limited financial resources and with minors, that can fully exercise the freedom of education enshrined in the Constitution. Italy remains the last country in Europe without effective educational equality, and I believe it is right to reflect on this issue with progressiveness and common sense, but above all by clearing the debate of the ideological prejudices that have for too long prevented us from addressing the issue. Yet all these seemingly sector-specific policies, along with many others that I won't be mentioning for limited time, must be part of a broader project to innovate the structure of the state, which is what Italians have asked us to implement after decades of stagnation, which we must continue, I believe, to pursue with courage, even in the face of apparently unsurmountable resistance, where they're not. And so we will continue with the 3 major reforms. First and foremost, the reform of the premiership, because we believe that the direct election of the head of government is the most solid guarantee of stability and governability. And stability, as we have seen in recent months, is an extraordinary factor in the competitiveness of the country's economy. Not only that, but direct election is also the best way to ensure full correspondence between the popular mandate and the citizens' vote on the one hand and the composition of the government on the other. We want to put an end once and for all to the era in which citizens voted one way and then saw governments formed that were diametrically opposed to the election results.
Chiaramente.
Clearly, a democratically legitimate executive power must be accompanied by a process of increasing accountability for local areas and administrations and those who administer them. That is why we will continue with the reform of differentiated autonomy and Roma Capitale, always ensuring that these are a stimulus and not a competitive disadvantage for certain areas. And we will move forward with justice reform. We will move forward with the reform of justice despite the encroachment of a minority of politicized judges who are trying to replace Parliament and the will of the people. We will move forward. We will move forward not to subjugate the judiciary to political power as some ill-informed or more often disingenuous people claim, but on the contrary, to make justice more efficient for citizens and less influenced by the bad seed of political currents and ideological prejudices, to free it from politics. President Scholz, dear friends, building with new bricks means finding new energy and ideas. And I'm aware that these ideas do not necessarily come from the world of politics, but from examples in society that seek the greater good for all and not a partial good for the few. The meeting is a place that gives voice to many people, to many young people who are so unconventional that they prefer commitment to TikTok videos. To many authentically social works, to many companies committed to growing Italy with generosity and inventiveness. It is a place that expresses a notion which, particularly in this Jubilee year, hope and the desire to build that hope is the distinctive feature. I, the government, Italy, desperately need that hope and that desire to build it. So I'm not here to seek consensus. I'm here to ask for your help, because without places of living society, politics cannot succeed. You who have remained faithful to the charisma of your founder have never despised politics. Rather, quite the contrary, you have not shut yourselves away in the sacristies where outsiders would have liked to confine you, but you have always been willing to get your hands dirty. You have applied in reality that religious choice to which half a century ago others wanted to reduce the Italian Catholic world, and which St. John Paul II overturned when he described the consistency in the distinction between the spheres of faith, culture, and political commitment. Don Giussani, in a famous speech given in Assago in 1987, invited politicians to always look to the movements that from the bottom express the religious sense in society, that is that sacred energy of the heart that manifests itself as a desire for freedom and justice, and respect for the dignity of everyone, and works that help people to work, to join and network. That is what is needed to react in a tired and disenchanted time, but one in which hope still persists. That hope that does not yield, that is rooted in the determination that drives us to believe and to fight even when everything seems to be against us. That hope that T.S. Eliot dresses in poetry, raising a song of love and joy to the heavens from the workers in a vacant place that would have made even the most daring flee. We will build the beginning and the end of the road. We will build its meaning, a church for all and a job for each. Everyone to their work. So, let everyone take their cement and their bricks, because it is now time to build together. Thank you.